Hi, Bevan Clatworthy here. Welcome to the Tinkerbot episode 1. So I actually managed to make it in this time, on time, and I've set up a schedule, and I'm hoping every Sunday to be recording these and then try and plough them out on each Friday, as the first one did, as the pilot episode did, so that's good to know, good to see. So what I'd like to start with the first episode, the inaugural episode, is with one of my sort of design ethos, one of the things that drives my design work and what I like to sort of employ when I go back to thinking about new ideas or sticking with old ideas and sort of incorporating different concepts and themes and such like. Like a design philosophy, I suppose, if that doesn't sound too pretentious. And it's the idea that I like to sort of try and make sure I run the gamut of different types of games. So when I say types of games, I mean things like deck builders, dice, drafting games, worker placement, area control. You know, just to make sure that I don't end up in a situation where I don't branch out, where I don't try and get myself out there and doing things that are a bit different. I don't want to be typecast, as it were. This all stems from where, you know, when I first started designing sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and I was really heavily into the World of Warcraft TCG. It was kind of like a simplified version of Magic, where you've got like your monsters and things and your resources, and the resources were quite cool. You flip them and they would give you stuff if you managed to complete them. They were like quests or something like that. And obviously the very first thing I then designed was a TCG style game, one called Evotech, where you're sort of two fighting robots that are just sort of dashing at each other and smashing each other up. And I wrote all sorts of little bits of short stories and everything, because I was very inspired by it, because I love sort of the giant mechs and that kind of thing. That's one of my favourite sort of genres, especially things like Pacific Rim or not Attack on Titan. What's that one called? Gundam. That's quite good. I quite like that as well, just for the giant robots. So I ended up building this with a friend, and we played it around, and we really enjoyed it, and I showed it to a couple of people, and it was lukewarmly, that's the one, lukewarmly received. Because obviously it's a TCG, and they're very difficult to market for a start, and it was sort of one of the very first things that I'd sort of come up with and designed. So we ended up with, like, basically having to shelve it because it wasn't a viable thing. It wasn't something I felt like I could progress with, but it was a very good sort of educational learning experience for me. The friend I worked with, because he was very into his TCGs, that kind of thing, and he's carried on sort of gaming. I went into the design side, and then I started designing smaller card games. Card games seemed to be the thing I was getting into, because obviously that was what I was doing a lot of at the time. But from the sort of the World of Warcraft stuff, I started branching out then, and that's when I sort of discovered the world of board games, and that's what led me to the designing of board games, essentially, because I just love the idea of like the boards and the cards and the dice and everything. My very first sort of published design, Ghostal, was actually based on a game called Pirates of Nassau that I played with Angus A. Branson. You might have heard of him. Name drop. Poof. Who, and it used the sort of similar mechanics of, like, you roll some dice, those are your 3 dice that you've got to work with for the turn, and it depends on the order that you use them, would depend how far you went on these sort of straights. And I love that idea, but I wondered about sort of maybe could you go in like a single direction, or like multiple directions, or could you choose your direction instead of having to move along these straights in a certain order? And I found that absolutely fascinating, hence why I then sort of came up with this idea of Ghostal, which was what I thought at the time was like a dice placement, worker placement kind of game, but luckily a few of the reviewers and things came up with a much better idea that it's actually sort of a loose area control kind of game. So, it kind of branched from there, and the Halloween theme got put on it because it was Halloween at the time when I designed it, and it was, I love a good spooky theme as well. So that was my first foray into that kind of design. And then once I'd finished that one, I made the mistake then of very much focusing. Well, not a mistake. What would be a better way of putting that? I made a sort of a problem for myself, should we say? A problem for myself where I didn't have anything in the hopper afterwards. We'd done sort of a couple of design competitions and come up with a few designs from those, but none of those we felt that we could sort of push further forwards with at the time, as it were. So what ended up happening was Ghostal was finished, Ghostal was put onto Kickstarter, it was published, it went out to all the backers and everything, and that was fantastic. But I had nothing left in the hopper, so I was sort of like scrabbling around going, what can I do, what can I do? And what I didn't want to do then was another area controlled dice placement style kind of game, so I wanted to branch myself out. So I did. I kind of went out and I went, right, I don't want to do that again, let's do something completely excuse me, something completely different. So, you know, then there was some other games. In fact, I've got a whole list of games there. Should we go and have a quick look at that, and that'll sort of give us a bit more information about where I'm coming from with this sort of omni design kind of thing. So yeah, I love a good whiteboard, and here I've got sort of the 9 designs that I'm currently working on in terms of different mechanics and you know, the stages that I am with them. And you can, just to sort of show you sort of the variety that I sort of come up with when I'm trying to, as I said, expand myself into different genres. You can see horticulture, that's sort of a cross of area control, but that's also got sort of the tic-tac-toe element, and then spatial reasoning with the planting out of these things. Spoonicorns is a ladder climbing, dice drafting kind of game. The Pixel game is worker placement, but it uses polyominoes in the style, and you've got like a sort of a sieve building kind of element in there as well. Worm Farm is just pure straight deck building. Golems is another worker placement game, but there's a little touch of the area control in there as you try and fulfill contracts and things. Hack the Block, I don't know how to describe Hack the Block, it's a weird one where you've got this sort of character that's moving around, you're leaving trace, bit of a bizarre one. That's me trying to do something with chess. I know that's a bit of a no-no in terms of design, but yeah, fiddling with chess on that one. Don't know about that one yet. That's a card game, just a straight up silly little card game. And then Schlomp is sort of dice, but it's a lot of colour matching and that kind of thing. So there's going to be a lot of elements where you're going to take dice and then they stick together and they change colour and all sorts of weird stuff. Again, bit of a weird one, that one, but as you can see, I didn't want to typecast myself. I mean, these games here, they all came out at different times, different stages, but it was very much, I was deliberately driving myself towards and away from dice for some of these games, and I ended up putting them back in, and you know, if it made sense, but yeah, that's kind of where I went with it. So yeah, I love a good whiteboard, me. So that's essentially where I was coming at with that. I just love the idea of being able to sort of spread out and branch out into different things. I also find it sort of helps with my research as well, because then I deliberately seek out the sort of the odds and the ends games, you know, if it's a bit of an unusual game, or like if I'm on a deck builder kick, I'll go and play a load of deck builders like High Command, for example, down there. And a couple of others I've got sort of dotted around. Ascension, that's a great one. Dominion, obviously. Yeah, and it just sort of enriches me as a gamer as well, I suppose. It makes me more likely to seek out the odds and ends and the weirds and the wonderfuls, because at the end of the day, the hobby is getting so big, it's very easy to sort of just completely streamline yourself down the big games, you know, the massive games that come out like Rising Sun or Blood Rage or Ticket to Ride, you know, sort of get yourself stuck in those kind of massive games. And it's just nice to branch out, as I said. So, yeah, I guess that's where I'm coming at with all of that. What do you guys think? I mean, as a design, you know, the designers out there, do you try and sort of push yourself out into different areas, or do you try and concentrate on an area and master that before you'll actually go into sort of other different genres of type of game? Or do you just find that you naturally start going into them because you'll start on a particular design path and then mechanics that seem to fit the theme and make sense sort of clump their way into there? I mean, how do you do it? People who play games, do you deliberately seek out other styles of games just to see what kind of weird stuff people are coming up with? You know, those are my questions for you guys. So if you could, you know, let me know what you think, that'd be fantastic. Cheers, guys. Bye.